Like too much coffee. Welcome. My name is Dean. This is our program for today. We're busy, too busy. We've got Wayne Hanna and Alex Scooby from the Zen as Fuck podcast. They're going to join us a little later on. We're going to talk about Facebook. They changed their name today to Meta. Also, we'll get into some the harassment of nurses. It sounds like all you anti-vax truckers like to take all the knowledge you have and beat up nurses with it. So we'll come to their aid today, and we've got lots of other stuff going on. And joined on this beautiful Thursday, I think it's like 15 degrees outside, with James DiFiore from Blackball Media at James DiFiore on Twitter, and my friend and yours, editor of Quillette. Very bright man. Please welcome to the program, Mr. Jon Kay, ladies and gentlemen. Jon Kay's back.
How are you?
Hi. You like that? Do you like the two-person clap, or would you rather have no clap? You tell me, because we have you on from time to time.
Yeah, I think the critical mass for clapping is like 8 people, and when it's less than that, yeah, it's probably like a sort of hushed, awed silence is probably preferable. Yeah.
Would you like that? Because we are in awe of you. I mean, I was looking at your Twitter bio today, because I was, prepping for the program, and we follow you on Twitter.
So wait a second. You were prepping for the program, and you read my whole bio?
Yeah, the whole bio. Yeah.
Whoa. Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't. This is the first time I'm getting like a look into the sort of back rooms of how these things get made. I mean, I didn't know you got to the office so early.
Oh, it's just so succinct, though.
Wow.
Dude, yeah. 140 characters doesn't read itself. Neither
280.
Yeah,
they doubled it.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Apologize, you're right.
Yeah.
But I want to go through before we start, because I love having you on. You're the editor of Quillette. It says this in your bio here on Twitter, at Jon Kay. The picture is your beautiful disc from disc golf, which you have a passion for, which I think is awesome. But then we get into the good stuff. You're an author. You're a ghostwriter for the National Post. You're a columnist. You've appeared in TEDx symposiums. You're educated at McGill and Yale. You're a gamer. This is where it gets fun. You're a lapsed Jew. You like Lego, disc golf, and tweets monthly. I'm sorry. I don't know if I'm the only person that finds that funny, but it's like there are very few people who are super honest about themselves and what they do in their Twitter bios, and you just laid it right out there, and I love it. I'm sorry, I do.
Well, yeah, but I got to correct it. It's true. I am an editor at Quillette, but sometimes people say like I'm the editor. My boss, her name is Claire Lehman. Maybe some of your listeners know. Mm-hmm. She's the big boss. She's in Sydney in Australia. I'm one of her toiling minions. So on my business card it says editor, but I don't want to give anyone the impression that I call the shots at Quillette. Everyone has a boss, including me.
Yeah. No, I get that, but you're in Canada, right? Because Quillette's out of Australia.
There's a guy. So my colleague Jamie Palmer works in London, and then my colleague Colin Wright is in the United States. And then there's me, and there's 1 or 2 other people. It's a small shop. Sometimes at one point I was calling myself Canadian editor, but I mean most of the stories I'm working on usually aren't by Canadian authors. Although I do love recruiting Canadian authors. Mm-hmm. Although lately, we talked about before you started recording, I'm spending probably at least half my time on the podcast now, mm-hmm. Which is weird because 5 years ago I barely knew what a podcast was, and now it's half of what I do.
When did you start it?
Well, I started with a podcast with Deborah So called Wrong Speak, which we did 16 of those, with Dan Delmar out of Montreal, who basically coached us through it. He's a CJAD radio veteran. Was very patient with us, and then what Quillette started up 3 years ago, I think, the podcast, mm-hmm. And we're now at 4.2 million downloads. So we're very proud of that.
No kidding.
Yeah, we make money. I never thought people would pay money to advertise on any show that featured my voice, but apparently we live in a weird age where you can sell anything, even this.
Well, dude, it's a good, it's got to be a good. Deborah So is terrific. I mean, she's a free thinker. She's very bright. She's a sexologist of sorts. I don't want to short sell her.
She has a PhD in sexology.
Yeah.
Now, there was a mismatch in terms of talent. I always said that I played Oates to her Hall, and I played Garfunkel to her Simon. Like it was clear that because she had the PhD and the expertise, people were tuning in to hear her, and it was like and Jon. I was, I was the guy with the accordion and the monkey, and she, and anyway, and I think she has, since then she's written a book, and she's a columnist. So her future is extremely bright. She's a very, very, very smart woman and a good podcaster.
Yeah, I would love to, you're gonna have to forgive me. What's the name of the podcast? When do you put it out, and where can we find it?
Well, my podcast is the Quillette podcast, and if anybody reads Quillette, we were talking before. Half of my guests are people who also write for Quillette. So
convenient to find guests that way.
It actually is, and I feel guilty because it's inescapable that sometimes when you're editing an article, as you're editing it, you're thinking, "Wow, this would be a really good person to have on the podcast," and it does happen. And it happens the opposite. Sometimes you're interviewing someone for the podcast, and you realize that this person knows a ton, and a couple of months later, you've got them writing under their byline. So I think, but this is like a common story these days, where 10 or 15 or 20 years ago, people would do one thing, right? Like they were a writer, or they're, and now I think just people, James, you were talking before that you're writing a book, and I think people have to hustle in different media to stay busy these days.
Definitely.
Yeah, very different, right? Like it is. And Jon Kay joins us. He's the editor of Quillette here in Canada. At Jon Kay on Twitter is where you can find him. Quillette the podcast, wherever you get your fine podcasts. And does it kind of, because I think this has been like sea change moment in the last couple of years. For sure, the pandemic has sped it up because everybody's doing content at home. From safer environments, but. When you said something that intrigued me, and I talked to a lot of people about this because of the business that we do. We also do third-party podcasts. We help people monetize podcasts. We do the foundational work, all the stuff that like rehab. We take people out of traditional media and we help them into this area. And the one thing that everybody says to me, and I'd love to get your thoughts on it. You said, you even make money, like you get paid to do your podcast. Now you got 4.5 million downloads in and around there. Are you kind of like does it wake you up a bit about the decentralization possibilities when it comes to content delivery for people? In the world that we live in, where media is really the narrative is being driven by very few entities, and a lot gets missed.
Yes and no, because I know people who listen to tons of podcasts, but if you look at their podcast list, it's like the New York Times podcast. They listen to BBC podcasts. They listen to podcasts that are produced by huge media companies, and that's fine. I mean, there's a lot of good podcasts like that. And then on the other hand, I know people, and I guess I'm one of them, that the podcasts I listen to tend to be like really niche. Like I love historical podcasts. I've written about it. There's one called The History of Rome. There's one called Revolutions. I'm listening to one, History of England. I just discovered it's fantastic. And these are podcasts that were History of Rome. A guy by the name of Mike Duncan, originally out of Seattle, started in 2007 as a great example, because when he started, he had like 100 listeners. He wasn't even a professional historian. He's probably done something like 400 podcast episodes since. And now he's internationally celebrated author. His podcast has I'm guessing tens or hundreds of thousands of listeners. So he himself, he's part of the media establishment now. So you do get and then you get other people. It's maybe some of your listeners have heard of this. I think it's called the Chapelle Roadhouse or something. This podcast out of the U.S., this left-wing podcast, which I think makes tons of money and has a lot of. It's like famous within sort of left-wing podcasting subculture, but it hasn't really kind of. It's not part of what you would call mainstream media. See, and then there's something like Quillette, which is hard to classify. It's sort of we get 25, 30,000 downloads a week, but it tends to be sort of a black turtleneck, academic, scientific podcast. One thing I did notice is there was a big uptick in listenership and ad revenue during the pandemic. We were typically doing one ad per episode, so one ad a week. And then suddenly we were doing 2 ads a week and sometimes 3 ads a week. And we were saying no to new advertisers at one point. And I'm sure it's different across different sectors, but based on my anecdotal evidence, there was just a lot of people spending time listening to podcasts in the first 6 months of the pandemic. That's tapered off a little bit. But when you're in the podcasting business, you get an insight into people's behavior. Some of the people who email me, like sometimes they say, I listen while I'm driving, or I listen while I'm walking my dog, or like you realize that even within your own little podcasting niche, there's different tribes of people who are listening to you. So it's not like TV or radio maybe where it's just like a mass broadcast thing.
Right.
There's a little bit more intimacy, I think, because you're just in more regular email and social media contact with your listeners.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those incredible things, and we'll move off podcasting and the tech part of it, but the niche thing is incredible. Like we just put a podcast on called Offload Delay. It's for first responders. It's like a self-help first responders thing for firemen, ambulance people, or paramedics. I think they call them ambulance people. I think they've moved on to paramedic from ambulance people, I think, recently. But anyway, like paramedics. And it's amazing because out of the gate, that thing like smashed all records that we had for brand new podcasts that we just put on the air. And it was amazing because we targeted people with it that we knew would like it, right? And we live in that world. And to your point, radio, television, they would just throw these big drag nets because that was it. And it was, you hope to grab people, but you can literally target people with your content now. And people will look for things that they're very interested in. Case in point, your history stuff. You love history. I do too. I listen to neuroscience podcasts. I listen to stoicism podcasts, philosophy podcasts. And I know exactly where to get them and what interests me. And so that's kind of the benefit of the world that we live in right now.
Before we pivot away from podcasts, Jonathan, I was just curious what your thoughts were on. Is it surprising, given like the click era that we've been living in for 15, 20 years, that a medium that produces long form content would be so popular? Did that surprise advertisers because it was genuinely sort of an anomaly, or did it surprise them because it went completely against how they make money?
Sorry, I've got my phone beeping and booping. So that's my.
You got a roast in the oven. You got to go turn.
No, I have this Ring thing, which is on my front door, and every time a squirrel runs across the lawn, Ring something.
But that is the most ADHD thing I've ever heard in my life.
But what's great about Ring, it's RING. And by the way, this is not a podcast ad. You can adjust the sensitivity, but I like the high sensitivity because at the end of the day, you can create a sort of video montage of every time there was activity on your front door. And I could pretend like I'm sort of 80 years old and like watching this sort of closed circuit camera in my assisted living facility. And it was just like, oh, there's a squirrel. Oh, that's the one that with half a tail. And the mailman.
So no to long form content.
There's a mailman who anyway. So that's a total segue. So the long form content is. It's such an interesting question because I have done 45-minute podcasts where I get people complaining, saying like, "Oh God, you just scratched the surface." That they'll say, "I like Jordan Peterson, or I like Sam Harris because, or I like Joe Rogan because it's like 3 hours sometimes." Like, and people some people love that, and then, I absolutely can't do that, and I think you have to obey your natural attention span. Like the most fascinating guest in the world, my natural attention span as a host, as an interviewer, is an hour is the max. And I have to obey that because if I stretch it out past an hour, I'm not giving people my best. I also hate flabby podcasts. So this is why I remember back in the day, I used to listen to Slate Gabfest, it was called, or whatever. I think that's what it was called. And it was like 3 or 4 media insiders, and like the first 10 minutes was them just sort of slapping each other's backs and asking about their weekend and a few inside jokes. And I remember like, why are you wasting my time like this? And then the thing would go on for an hour, or it seemed like an hour. And I found it insulting because it's like, you're presuming that I want to listen to you kibitz for 10 minutes. Like my time is so, cheap that like this is the most valuable thing I could be doing. And yet there are people who like that. There are people who love the kibitzing. And so I think it just goes to personality. I like a tight podcast. I like a sort of question answer format. And I edit all my own podcasts myself on my computer. And there's a lot that gets left on the cutting room floor because I try and keep things tight. That's just my style. That's my style. That's my style of editing. And it's not for everybody. Some people like more of a conversational style, but that's not me.
So you edit your own podcast?
Yeah.
See, like this is that world that I fucking love. I love the fact you've got the editor of Quillette in Canada literally editing his own podcast.
I love it. It's my favorite thing to do in media. I use Audacity, and as soon as I got into multi-track editing, and I sort of like watched online videos about how to use the advanced features, and I absolutely love it. And it gives me such a sense of control, because when I did my old podcast, we had this professional producer. Who, by the way, was technically a lot better than me. I mean, it's like anything else, a true professional, and anyone who listens to my podcast will know that I'm not a professional sound engineer. But my old podcast, Wrong Speak, the technical production was better, but it would take weeks, and I didn't have direct editorial control over the product, which bothered me. I learned how to use audio editing software because I wanted to do the interviews, and I wanted fine-grained control of what the product would sound like. And now it's one of the favorite parts of my job is the actual editing of podcasts. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's awesome, dude. It's great to hear you talk about it because, no one, I say it all the time, no one's immune from doing the work. Doesn't matter who you are or what your paycheck looks like, what your title is. The fact that you get in the trenches because you love it is incredible, and it's a great statement about the industry. Speaking of the industry, the traditional media industry is what it is, and Netflix has done a number, and we go to them for stuff, and they're now the touch point for these issues that we're experiencing in the trans community. James and I have talked about this, and we kind of run around about it. And I know that you've been very outspoken about the Chapelle thing on your Twitter feed, but we talked about it this week. Chapelle's been canceled again somehow, and I would love your take on the entire thing. I don't know if you've seen The Closer, but just the aggressiveness with which people are treating this man, the aggressiveness with which we're told the trans community is being treated as a result of this man, and of course what's happened since. But what do you make of the whole Chapelle thing?
So, look, Chapelle has not been canceled, and there are people who use the term cancel culture in a very loose, overly broad sense. A guy who's making tens of millions of dollars, who's scoring, I think, 97% audience approval on Rotten Tomatoes, and a guy who has Netflix executives behind him. Like, Netflix executives were pretty clear, like, to their own employees, that we're not taking this content off our streaming service, and they could, like, it's the flick of the switch. Not just this special, all of Chapelle's content can be taken off. However, it's extremely popular. It's some of the most popular content on Netflix. And this is actually one of the interesting subplots, is, as others have noted, if you go to Rotten Tomatoes and look for reviews of The Closer, which is Chapelle's latest special, as many people know, Rotten Tomatoes is this aggregator where it looks at reviews and reaction from a lot of different sources and gives it an aggregate score out of 100, and that is subdivided into two scores typically, where one is the audience score. It's sort of like ordinary people like you and me, and then there's this sort of critic score, which is, if you're the TV critic at the LA Times or something like that, or you're a New Yorker writer, or anyone, a professional media critic, and that score. And often it's the divergence between those two that tell you a lot about which way our culture is swinging. So in the case of Chapelle, it's like, I don't know, 95 or 97% audience score. Everyone loved it. And then the critic score is like, I don't know, 30 or 40%, because if you're a critic, you're not allowed to like it. If you say, yeah, this was pretty funny, you might get your colleagues jumping down your throat and saying, "What? Oh, it's funny to literally exterminate people with your jokes." Like, so you can't say those things, and as a result, you're forced to manufacture opinions that are consistent with ideology. By the way, the same thing happened when Louis C.K. came to Toronto.
That's right.
I mean, as we know, Louis C.K. is a different example, because Louis C.K. actually did bad things. Like, it wasn't just he told jokes about people you're not supposed to tell jokes about. Like, Louis C.K. has admitted to misconduct that was traumatizing to female colleagues, and yet.
But he asked them if he could traumatize them.
Yeah, and I'm only introducing this subject.
I know, I'm just kidding.
I know you're kidding, but it's I'm gingerly stepping over landmine territory, and I got to the other side, and then you brought me back into it.
That's right.
So
fun having James around, isn't it?
yeah, God,
I'm just doing my job, Jonathan. I don't know what the fucking problem is.
Where's the mute button? Anyway, so
I'll show you.
Okay, yeah, touche. But anyway, when he came, I think it was to Yuck Yucks, after a couple of years of sort of being in Purda. The tickets were going for like $200 or something on StubHub, and I know because I tried to see the show, and I ended up not going because I could only get one ticket, and I wanted to bring other people. I didn't want to go by myself, and people loved it. I think he played 3 sold-out shows in Toronto. But then when you looked at the reviews in, like, I think it was Now magazine or whoever deigned to even admit that they had attended such a lowbrow show by a person who was, a menace to women, it was all dripping with condescension and how I didn't laugh once. I could barely even listen to the jokes. I was so busy scanning the room for all the men's rights troglodytes who no doubt were around me and probably thinking horrible things as they listened to this this hero of theirs. And this is a real problem because we're also often talk about divisiveness in our society. Typically, we're talking about the political sphere, but it now extends to what we're supposed to laugh about. And, it's very telling. This, on the other side, is this woman, Hannah Gadsby, who is like, I'm not even sure the term comic applies, because it's a comedian who kind of, it's this confessional humor that's not really jokes. It's just sort of social commentary. It's the sort of stuff you don't laugh at, but you're supposed to kind of clap at. It's sort of ideological recognition. And she's gone to the forefront of the criticism of Chapelle. And if Chapelle came to Toronto and did a bunch of shows, he might be able to play the Rogers Center. Gadsby would probably play Tim Hortons. And on the other hand, if Gadsby came to Toronto to do a show, that's an exaggeration, by the way. I think at one point she was scheduled to play Roy Thompson Hall before the pandemic killed that show. But I guarantee that if Gadsby came to Toronto, like, the arts media would become incontinent with excitement about the opportunity to interview this, like, stunning and brave icon of modern comedy.
Did you just say incontinent?
I did.
Like
they would go to the bathroom in their pants, is what I meant. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. That's what
it's
incontinent.
So true.
That's
so true. I know what it means.
Yeah, but thank you for making me say what it means, because that makes it classier.
Incontinent. But I understand with the analogy. Like, I get what you're saying, because
in their pants. Do you understand?
Yeah. People. All of it. Yes.
Bathroom, actually,
I know.
It's one of those words that sounds kind of like august. And
I thought it was a breakfast that you get at, like, a hotel.
In a sense, it is. And if it's one of the words that sounds respectable until you explain what it means, which you made me do.
Yeah, thank you. You're welcome. Yeah. But you bring up a point, because it's amazing to watch. It's almost like if people that didn't have an interest, some kind of selfish interest in, Dave Chapelle versus the trans community, or the trans community versus Dave Chapelle, the fallout would be nil to me. Like, I watching Hannah Gadsby get to the front of the line, and sure, did Dave introduce her name to it? Because that was one of the conditions that he said he gave Netflix. Netflix gave him, is that he had to admit Hannah Gadsby wasn't funny, which I don't find her to be terribly amusing, but that's not my kind of humor, right? But she puts, her trauma out as an act. That's what she does.
That's
fine. Is this the double mastectomy one?
I don't think that's what it says on her Twitter.
No, I'm just asking. No, okay. So I never heard of
the double mastectomy one.
The one. Yeah. The one that went on stage and did it like an act. I watched it with my girlfriend at the time, or my wife, I guess, at the time. And it was a woman who took off her shirt because she had a double mastectomy. It was just like this social commentary thing, and everyone loved. It was exactly how you described. They clapped for her but didn't laugh with her. Yeah. I don't know if that's the same one or not. But
it might be. I don't know. Yeah. But I just to your point, John, is that I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's social media, but it's almost like when this comes up, it's like there are certain groups of people and certain people that rub their hands together and go, all right, it's go time for me. Now is where I shine.
Absolutely. And I'm a prime example, because I'm not a huge Dave Chappelle fan. I think he's funny enough, but the only reason I watched The Closer was because people told me not to watch The Closer.
That's right.
Same.
And but like no, and a lot of his humor is he's a very talented comedian. But you know me, I've admitted to this before that I'm an intellectual snob, and so you know, I could be watching BBC America, you know, instead of something on Netflix, which I wouldn't subscribe to anyway if it weren't for my family. But I watched it. The reason is that people ramp this stuff up. The test is, okay, can we get this guy canceled? Can we get Netflix to take him off the air? Because if we can, it means we have the power. And so it's almost like an election. You know, one reason people care about elections is about who's going to be in power for the next couple of years. But they also care about elections because it's a show of strength, right? Even if the policies don't change, as they often don't in a lot of G7 countries, it's a nice way to say who's ascendant, who's winning, who's losing, who's popular, who's, you know, who hasn't been invited to the rich kid's birthday party. And it's the same thing, because if the Netflix employees that walked out and in fact staged this quite hilarious protest against Dave Chappelle, if they had successfully pressured Chapelle, the CEO of Netflix, to get Chapelle off the air, much like the Spotify protesters who tried to get Spotify to take Joe Rogan off the air, if they had succeeded in that task, it would have been a show of strength. It would have said to the world, we're in charge, you can't laugh at this. And if you do laugh at this, or worse yet, tell jokes that encourage other people to laugh at this gospel, you will be canceled too. It is a warning. It's a saber-rattling maneuver. And in this case, it failed. But that's why people armor up for this stuff, because they know that the world is watching and it's a test. And if they win, they get the show of power on their side. And if the other side wins, it means they have the power. So that's kind of what's going on here. In my opinion.
What do you think about, like, I mean, I don't think Joe Rogan fits this example, but is Dave Chappelle sort of a glitch in the Matrix? The Matrix being that sort of social panic trends that we see in various issues. And the second part of that question is, do you think that the trans issue itself is really the thing that often gets, like, if someone was accusing Joe Rogan of being racist, it probably would have been a lot worse for him than it was because they were saying that he was transphobic, like 6 months ago.
I disagree. I disagree.
And well, hold on. And then the Chapelle thing, the thing that strikes me, the reason why I would call him the glitch is because he's a black man, who apparently is lower on the hierarchy of victimology or whatever than white biological males. And
I totally. So you had me at glitch because he is kind of like this guy who, as you say, you know, it's not like he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth, as I understand, and he's a black guy, and the way he speaks is very much like it's appeals to the black demographic, and everything about him suggests that you would think that all the same people who in the summer of 2020 were demanding, says, you must listen to black voices, you must stop decentering white narratives, such as the narratives of wealthy Netflix workers, and listen to the authentic cultural expression of black voices. That's what we were told to do. It's not a bad exhortation. And then this glitch in the Matrix says, oh, hey, so you're listening to me. Okay, well, you know, as a black man, don't you think it's weird that like all these people who went to Harvard and Yale and Haverford and Oberlin College think that men can become women and women can become men? That's kind of fucked up, right? And everyone's like me saying, yes, Dave, it is quite fucked up. And all these progressives are horrified. They're like, no, that's not what you should be saying with your microphone. You should be talking about how we need to abolish the police. Make jokes about abolishing the police and we will laugh at them. And Dave Chappelle is a glitch because he says, no, actually, I don't want to make jokes about that. I want to make jokes about, I'm not going to repeat the problem. I was thinking before that we did this, I want to do a riff of some of the best jokes from The Closer. The problem is all the best jokes in The Closer involve saying the N-word. And
whenever that comes up, just say Lachlan instead.
No, but the thing is, when I recited the joke in my own mind, saying, quote, N-word, end quote, instead of saying the actual N-word, which of course I would never do, I'm like, it's not as funny. And so I'm going to have to disappoint everybody by not doing a Dave Chapelle riff.
Attaboy.
Yeah.
But thanks for doing it for us off air before the show began. That was awesome.
Totally. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I dropped those N-bombs. I'm sorry about that. But I had to do that. Anyway, so yeah, but it is a glitch because, again, I was talking before about how it's about proving who's boss, and intersectionality is about proving who's boss, right? It's like, who's on top, who's the bottom. It's like, oh, you're queer and disabled, but I'm Black and Hispanic, so and so when Dave Chapelle comes around, and it's like, okay, you are a rich white asshole who works at Netflix and has unpronounceable pronouns, and Dave Chapelle is a rich, privileged by class, but Black male comic, but making jokes about LGBT stuff that we all know is hilarious, but we're not allowed to laugh at. And from an intersectionality, if I may use that term, intersectionality analysis,
You may.
it's a fascinating thing. Which one of those people gets to win? It's like those video games where, like the kids talk about, I'm going to versus you. It's hilarious. Kids in video games, they use versus as a verb. They say, oh, it's
reversing each other.
Yeah, I can't come to dinner. I'm versing a Pokemon or whatever. So it's like, so here you have, Chadwick Thane III, who went to Haverford and uses they them pronouns, and has been diagnosed with 17 different kinds of gender fluid conditions, and he is like some kind of, I don't know, vice president at Netflix, and he feels oppressed because this rich Black guy is making jokes about trans people. That's a legitimately interesting versus. That's like, I don't know, Pokemon versus Mario. I don't know, whatever. It's but we can't, like, I can sit back. I don't have a dog in this race, right? Because I'm not a member of either subculture. So I can just like sit back and say, oh, this is going to be good. I wonder. But the thing is, hold on. You're touching on the same thing, and I say this to James all the time. Like, when these issues come up, I'm like, just grab your popcorn, because there's a statement about the rest of the world here, right? Yes, but you know what? What's amazing is that this social justice thing, all they're producing really is entertainment for people like you and me.
Like us, yeah.
Yeah, and we're like the scum of society. Like, we're super cis-ish white males. I mean, I'm Jewish, but that doesn't count anymore. I mean, God, it's
it does on the hierarchy
it
of like
come on,
you want to
really,
you want to get
kind
intersectional.
No,
You play Jewishness plays in the intersection race. It really does. Sure, it does.
It's like, you know what? It's a rounding error. It's like
it's not even that, because the left is in charge of all this shit.
It's a tie ghost runner.
So,
okay. So if the trans group is at the top of the power center pecking order when it comes to telling people what's funny and what isn't funny, and then you've got being Black is in there too. Where is being Jewish? Does it not enter into the scope of things? I think it would.
Yeah, we're agents. I mean, that's we get our 15%. But
part of the white supremacist structure.
When Hannah Gadsby fights Chapelle, I get my 15% on both ends. I don't care who wins. All I care is they both get on stage. I mean, what they actually say. By that time, I've gone to take a schwitz. There's one thing I want to say though.
That means sauna, ladies and gentlemen.
You and I, the three of us, can have this discussion in a kind of like we're having fun with it. I talk about it at arm's length. Like I said, I don't have a dog in the race. It's an expression. I'm not comparing anybody to dogs. However, one thing that I feel bad for people who are social justice diehards is they can't have this kind of conversation. It can't be like, okay, look, Dave, what are we going to do here? I got all this pronoun stuff going on. You're super Black. Like, let's, like, what are we going to do? Instead, the LGBT person has to basically writhe around on the floor and play passive aggressive, like, you're literally exterminating me with your jokes. I feel holocausted. Like, every time I hear a peal of laughter, a little bit of me is peeled away like an onion, and soon there will be nothing left. And so Netflix executives have to save me by taking this content off the air, because they've been told that that's the game they have to play, that it can't be a straightforward aggressive battle of words, they have to be passive aggressive, and it's tedious and infantilizing, and I can't take it anymore, which is why I just make jokes about it, because they're pathetic. So there's that, and they have to live that sad and pathetic life. And when they are shown to the general public, as was shown, you guys all saw that video of the so-called protest outside.
Oh, this one here, the one, yeah. This one of the dude. This guy kills me, by the way. This guy is so funny.
I like
you gotta,
yeah.
He shows up to protest for Dave at the Netflix protest.
Yeah.
And in his fervor, he gets attacked by all the people protesting against Dave. They rip his pro-Dave sign down. They then tell him he's got a weapon and then chase him down because they made the weapon for him. Yep.
And you're watching this, and the only person I like in this video, the only person in this, look at this little dude who's like using his arms to save.
Don't assume gendered.
To save Christmas.
Don't assume that's a dude.
Yeah. Sorry, a dude like humanoid. Anyway, the only person in this video I like is the fat guy who likes Dave Chapelle. He's the only likable person here. Everyone here.
He's like that fat guy from Game of Thrones. Sam Gamgee. He never did, or no, that's
Sam.
Wrong
Gamgees. That's Lord of the Rings. I know what you mean.
Yeah,
he's like a happy guy. He's not being violent. He's just like, hey, I'm just here to do the same thing you're doing, but for the other guy.
Right. Everybody else is like the spoiled bad guy from a 1980s movie about camp kids. Like he's the likable one. He's the every person, and even when he gets thrown out, he has a sense of humor about it.
What is it about? What is it?
Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I just want to know, like, sometimes when we talk about anti-vaxxers on this show, I have a sympathetic, like, there's a part of my brain that's sympathetic towards a portion of the anti-vaxxers or the vaccine hesitant, because I just think that some people don't know how to research. They don't always have in the front of their mind, this might not be true when they hear something on the internet and stuff. When it comes to the trans activists, like people that you see there, or people that are just sort of like, yeah, I'll go along with this. Should I give any like time thinking about, well, maybe their perception is, sometimes I think that their perception is that if you say the name Bruce Jenner, you're basically saying the N-word. Like it's on that level now. And I'm just trying to figure out if this is like something that we need to work on by I'm going to sound like one of them. Maybe they just need to be educated about this subject a little bit more.
There's a couple of things going on. I think that if you spend years in an environment where you tell people that if you say the word Voldemort, that it creates a sort of brain injury, I think that perception becomes reality. These historical podcasts I listened to, there was some fascinating religious battles among early Christians, and I guess the Arian heresy of, I think it was like the 4th century, and Orthodox Christians fighting against what we now call Catholics. And what would happen is some local politician would change the way a certain prayer was said on Sunday, and people would hear the prayer, and if it didn't align with their sect, they would just go bananas and start burning the town down. And the historical record shows that these people heard those prayers and responded to it as if they'd been assaulted. Here's sometimes Muslims will see a Quran desecrated and they'll respond in a violent way. History shows that there are instances in which people have been trained to see acts of symbolism, including the symbolism that accompanies spoken words, as if it is a sort of form of assault, and that they respond in a medical way. I personally don't think it's healthy to train people to react to the words Bruce Jenner as if they were being hit on the head with a 2x4. And if you go through life thinking that, it's natural that you're going to go through life in this state of sort of just infantilized vulnerability, where you demand the right to censor everybody's speech because you have this knowledge that you'll be brought to your knees in a state of agony by the utterance of certain syllables. That's not a healthy way to go through life, and it's not a healthy thing to teach people. The other thing I would say is I know people who are in their 20s and have went to college, have gone to college, and have been in that environment, and have been in ultra progressive white environments where intersectionality is treated as gospel. And look, if you're a straight, white, non-Indigenous, wealthy, able-bodied, mentally healthy student in an environment where intersectionality is gospel, literally the only thing you can do to move yourself up the hierarchy is announce that you're genderqueer or gender fluid or non-binary. None of these words I'm giving have any definition whatsoever that has any sort of precision. Being transgender does have a precise definition. It means you have gender dysphoria. But it is very tempting, and I think we need to understand that temptation, that if you're a privileged white kid, sometimes the only way you could move up the status hierarchy within your peer group is to announce that you are some exotic variant of gender. And it's just like kind of behavioral economics. If you say you're going to have higher status, you might even have higher job opportunities if you're in the arts or academic sector. I think that's certainly true. It's actually made explicit in a lot of job requirements for government now and stuff, or at least in terms of what they're looking for, who gets a leg up. Why would young adults not be encouraged to imagine that they answer to these very vague descriptions, non-binary and gender fluid and whatever, and B, then also weaponize the vulnerability that goes with that as a means to silence critics, silence comedians, tell skeptics to shut up, and especially comedians, actually, because once people start laughing, if you say, oh, I'm something called gender fluid, once the first guy in the room laughs and he's allowed to laugh, everybody laughs because it is funny, because it's ridiculous, because there's no such thing as gender fluid. It's bullshit. And once somebody is allowed to say it, someone like me, people are obsessed with making sure I'm punished. Or somebody who's a billion times more famous than me, like David Chapelle, if he makes a joke about it, they are a billion times more motivated to shut that person up. Because like I say, once one person is allowed to laugh at it, everybody's allowed to laugh at it. And if it weren't funny, they wouldn't care about shutting the comedian up. It's because it is funny that they have to shut them up.
And because it's funny, it's popular, then therein is a chain reaction. Jon Kay, editor of Quillette, at Jon Kay on Twitter. We gotta roll, but I want to thank you. Before I let you go, I want to ask if you're going to go to Zanzibar again for your third booster shot.
Man,
Spears here,
vaxxed and waxed. Check and check. So,
no pass, no ass.
I just
I'm more of a breast man.
This is a tweet that John put out. Great to see Toronto's live entertainment industry take responsibility for promoting sound science-based public health. And he took a shot of Zanzibar's the front of their building. It says no pass, no ass, vaxxed and waxed. So you're good.
I mean, what is vaxxed and waxed? Like vaxxed and waxed. Oh, sorry. I just realized they mean the entertainers. They're not the clientele.
They're waxed.
Okay, I'll wax. Why don't you wax? Like
what? The bouncer checks everyone to make sure they're waxed.
Okay, I'll show you, but I don't see how this should be a qualification to get in. But I will say, I was at the corner of Dundas and Yonge, which is, for people who aren't in Toronto, that's kind of like the center of the commercial area of downtown. I don't think I'd been there for like a year because of COVID and because I'm as old as the hills. And I'm scared of young people. So it was like
I used to buy drugs there.
I was there because I had to get something at Old Navy for my daughter for her Halloween costume. I won't get into it. But
drugs.
I wholesome. While you're destroying society, I'm
just myself, John. It's okay.
So I was at Gould. That's where Ryerson is. So I think it's just above Dundas. There is a new for me, like kind of outdoor taco place. I think it's called Mexi on the southeast corner, Gould and Yonge. It's like 100 yards from Zanzibar, and you do not have to be vaxxed and waxed to eat tacos at this place. It's like the best taco I've ever had in my life. There's like this row. There's this row of outdoor places. One place that sells churros, and I was too late for that. There's a fried chicken place. There is like a seafood place. They're kind of like outdoor, sort of like, those rail cars they convert into restaurants. Yeah. It's kind of like that. And it's on the southeast corner. It's Gould and Yonge. The taco place, I think it's called Mexi or whatever. I was like, I couldn't even see because I was like having such a rhapsodic, almost sexual experience from this taco. and so I didn't get the name of the place, but it was like the best taco I've ever had. And I just, again, we talked about podcasting.
No taco.
No, yeah, it's we'll put that on the whiteboard and work on it. But if this taco place is interested in podcast advertising opportunities, I would be honored to
me too.
do the host testimonial on that taco. Because man,
it was that good, huh? It was a good taco.
Taco took me to a Zanzibar within me. It was the Zanzibar within was accessed through the concave portion of the taco. All right, I got to go.
All right, man.
That was fun.
All right, John,
bye, everybody.
Appreciate you. We'll talk to you soon. That is Jon Kay.